Welcome, everyone, to this episode of Build America, the construction industry podcast that's capturing literally the heartbeat of what is taking place in our industry. And I am your host, Kerry Smith Buck, owner of Construction News and Review. And with us today, I'm excited about this fresh topic and perspective, is Amelia Dicks. And Amelia is Director of Business Development for Wind River Built, and they are a builder of modular and tiny homes. And we're going to talk about a broader topic of just our housing supply, our housing stock in the United States, and how maybe it could use a bit more diversifying. Amelia, thanks for joining us today on Build America. We're glad you're here.
Thank you so much. This is great.
Oh, great. Terrific. Let's dive right in. And we were talking before we came on about, I had dubbed the section working title of America's Housing Stock Diversity. And I have a feeling maybe I should have said that we're not anywhere near having a diverse housing inventory, but that's something you're going to talk to about. Is where have we been and how has the whole situation not gotten better since COVID? But let's jump right in, Amelia. Where are we today? Maybe let's talk about what, when we talk about housing stock, what that entails. And then if you could jump into kind of where we're at in terms of what we should have to meet demand.
Sure. So I think that everyone is talking about the issue of the housing deficit in this country. And the numbers that you'll hear are all over the place. The point is, it's a lot. It's anywhere between 1 million to some people will say up to 7 million, but it's a lot of housing that we know we need. And there's a lot of responsibility on builders to create new housing stock. But it's really important to take a step back and look at that from the perspective of housing diversity, because we have an issue in this country where we're building the same thing instead of building what the market needs. There's a really big disconnect between size and features of homes for new construction and the American household size and what people are prioritizing in the modern day. So this has been brewing for decades and decades, and it's been exacerbated by COVID and some of the implications there. So we at Wind River believe that modular construction is a way to relieve at least enough of the symptoms for why it's so difficult to build small housing, to finally make financial sense to build small homes anymore, because that's the core root of the housing diversity issue. Is we don't have small housing, and we have a country that's over 50% of Americans living as one or two people in a household. So we don't need big homes. We know we need more small homes, but there are a lot of also very complex reasons why people aren't building those. And we believe that offsite construction can make it make sense again.
Oh, that's an excellent summary, Amelia. And as you were speaking, I thought, is this somewhat of a generational issue too? Are we not aware of what the different consumers want? Who Gen Zs, maybe they would rather rent a condo, or seniors, are they aging in place? Or what do we need to be more in touch with who our consumers are to start?
Absolutely. And I think that what we're talking about is having different types of housing for different stages of life, and looking at someone's housing journey like rungs on a ladder. And like when you're first buying your first house, you don't need anything big and fancy. And then maybe later down in your life, you want to have a family, you need more bedrooms. And then maybe at the end of your life, you want to be downsizing and live small again. Or maybe the primary importance to you is being close to an urban center, being walking distance. So then we need multifamily and townhomes and things like that to get more thoughtful density, just to respond to what the market needs. Planning ahead for things that, if you don't have diversity, then people are having to look, they have to expand their radius for their home search. And that contributes to sprawl. That makes traffic worse for everyone. So there's a lot of interconnectedness there. Remind me your question. I feel like I missed part of it.
No,
Did I cover
I'm
it?
just fascinated by the topic. You totally covered it about as people age, maybe they choose to continue owning a home and age in place, or maybe they want to trade those responsibilities for another type of home. But
Right.
no, you did a wonderful job. I wondered, We all know, not to get into tariffs and all that stuff, but just in general, the cost of living and the supply chain and the cost to build, the cost of raw materials isn't decreasing by any means at all. So I wondered if you could talk to a little bit. You mentioned about there aren't a lot of small homes being built. And I wondered if that's, again, an industry assumption of what we as a population need, or if it's a reflection of the industry not being able to properly scale to build something that maybe is a little more modest.
Yeah, I think that everyone knows we need small homes. And so it's not that I think we all understand that there are much bigger issues standing in the way of making it possible for developers and builders to create small homes. It's we as a country, this is a quote from someone who spoke at the National Housing Supply Summit in DC last month, said, we as a country need to go on a zoning diet. There's zoning should be used to protect health and safety, and that's it. But too often it gets used as a tool for redlining. We see a lot of municipalities passing minimum square footage requirements that sort of dictate how small your home can be. That's a little ridiculous. There's nothing less safe about living in less square footage. The homes that are the starter home size, which I see generally defined as 1,400 square feet or less, most of that stock was built in the 50s and in the 60s. And that stock is occupied, and the people who own those homes are not incentivized to move, because a lot of those homes were also bought up during COVID, where interest rates were super low. And so you have a lot of people who are in really low interest rates and really small homes. And that's the most desirable type of housing that we need in our housing stock. But you can't bank on it coming on the market. And if it does, you're going to have a bidding war for something that's maybe 80 years old. So that's another reason why the burden of the housing supply is on builders to address that and to bring back small homes. But the other thing that I think people don't realize, we obviously are concerned about how tariffs might impact pricing, but we have been standing in our own way with regulatory compliance fees for new construction in a more substantial way than tariffs are going to impact building. And so one thing that the NAHB put out in sort of their housing supply slide deck that they presented in DC was that the average cost of a new home, the amount of that's going to regulatory fees has increased by 24% over the past
Wow.
few years since COVID, to where it's now almost $100,000. The average is 94,000 that goes to all sorts of regulatory and permits, and the way our building codes have evolved over time, requiring more in the building code. There's a need and a place for that, but when you do too much of it, every time you require something new, you're requiring a cost, and that's now a burden that ultimately ends up on the consumer, impacts the price of their home. And so it's very complex.
Oh, I'm sure. And at the end of the day, we have that messaging in our heads for a long period of time that everyone ought to have access to the opportunity of investing in a home. And it sounds like the more these regulatory barriers ramp up, it's supposed to be the American dream, but it sounds like it's not for a lot of people. Wow. So let's talk a little bit about modular building and what, in a residential standpoint, what modular is, or the size, or what it looks like, and where you're seeing it across the country, where you're seeing it play a role in helping diversify housing stock.
Yeah. The most important thing for listeners to understand about modular homes is that they are residential homes. And referring to something as modular is essentially referring to the code that it's being built to and the fact that it's being built offsite. This is different, starkly different from mobile homes. That's
Okay.
synonymous with the term manufactured homes. Those homes are built to a different code. Yes, they're built offsite in a facility, but they're being built to HUD code. And what that means from a supply standpoint is that there's normally zoning districts that are designated for HUD, and they're normally not allowed in residential, like your main R1, R2 zoning typically doesn't allow for manufactured housing. Modular housing is residential housing. It's being built to the state building code where it's being placed, which means you can place these in R1 main residential zoning. If you're doing modular townhomes, you can place those in the zoning districts for multifamily throughout the country. So it opens up so much more placement opportunities. The other big thing to understand about modular homes that's a huge benefit to the consumer is that this gets deeded to the land once it's installed. They're not designed to move again. This is real estate. And that means that you can get a traditional mortgage on a modular home, just like a residential home. That's sometimes a really tricky part of alternative housing is the financing for it. But with modular, because it's real estate, you can get traditional funding for it.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know a lot of those things that you just shared. Are there certain sort of cities or regions that are leading in terms of you're seeing modular housing catching on? I know that Wind River Built is headquartered near Chattanooga, isn't it? I wondered if that's a dynamic market or where you could point to across the country where we're seeing this really take off.
I think anytime that there's innovation in industry, we see that more in progressive areas like California or out west. It's also faster for that to take hold in those areas because it makes such a more significant difference in cost to build in those parts of the country. Down here, modular in the South and the Southeast has been slower to take on, so we feel like we're positioned on the forefront of it. But in more rural parts of the country where it's not as dense as, say, LA County, for example, another big draw of modular is being able to build and send a home to a rural location that you would otherwise have a really difficult time getting a contractor to do, and then having them navigate travel and everything adds to the cost of the build. It draws out the timeline. And so that's where it's taking hold here. But then we also see more and more state and federal incentives for innovative housing. Another reason why modular is slow to take hold is because there's not a lot of case studies, and there's some concern about appraisal and comps and how do you find those if there's not another modular project in the area. There's some developers are risk averse in many ways. And so one of the contributing, I'll take a sidebar here, one of the contributing factors for why the housing supply is so narrow and pigeonholed is because the process for getting a development approved is not certain. And a lot of times developers have to spend 6 or 7 figures to get to the point where they'll know whether or not their project is greenlighted or not. And that's very risky. And so they want to present a project that matches something that already exists in the area. And so that's another reason why if we can provide some case studies of modular residential developments in the Southeast, it just takes that innovative and forethought and people who need to look at doing things differently. And sometimes the government can play a role in incentivizing that. So that we have this housing alternative solution in this country, like this industry is growing. It's just a matter of getting the wheels turning a little bit. And then I think we'll see a lot more of it. But the main draw from a cost reduction standpoint comes from the fact that we're building day in and day out, regardless of the weather. So our timelines are very predictable and very reliable. And that translates to reducing your loan carrying costs for a developer. And time is very much money. If you're doing a built to rent development, you know exactly when you can start renting those union units as opposed to traditional construction where everything is changing and you're shooting at a moving target and the prices are changing. So modular also operates off of fixed costs. Those are the main benefits when we're talking to developers.
Cool. As you're speaking, Amelia, I wondered if you could give us just a brief peek into where these homes are being constructed And like is the roof and the siding, are certain things built certain places, or is it built from start to finish in a million-square-foot warehouse? Or how and where do they, I know it varies depending on the builder, but how and where do they come together?
Yeah, that's a good question too, because there's different types of modular construction. And so people get different images in their mind. You might think of people raising walls on site when you're flat packing the components of a house. That's called panelized modular. But what we're doing is full modular construction where we have assembly lines and there's a framing crew and a siding crew, and the boxes are shipping as fully complete as they can be. And if it's, we do a lot of single module homes, but there's also connecting modules and stacked. And so there is still a general contractor role that is doing your horizontal work on site, doing your foundation in preparation for the modular homes. And then they would also be involved in any stitch work to bring the modules together on site. But we're trying to do as much as possible in the facility. And if it's a single modular home, then it will be fully finished when it leaves here. And it's just a matter of craning it into place, which happens very quickly. It gets installed in a day. I think from a project approval standpoint, that's a big selling point too when you're talking to the community about your project. Hey, this is going to greatly reduce the amount of disturbance to your neighborhood. Like you're
Right.
going to have a construction project, but it's going to be shortened. There's not going to be as much heavy machinery and noise just from the nature of it being modular. But yeah, we're doing things as fully finished as we can.
That's fascinating. And you hit on the topic that is on and has been on everyone's minds in the construction industry, and that's the scarcity of workforce. We see robotics, we see sophisticated software platforms that allow for remote work, and just because there just are not enough skilled people. So I can see where, in the whole climate controlled aspect of it and the safety aspect, I can see where this would be appealing to workers to work in that
Absolutely.
environment.
Absolutely. So I think we have a lot of guys on our team that have worked on traditional construction sites. And we're saying, hey, come to work in a climate controlled facility. You're going to the same place every day. So you don't have to worry about being away from your family for months at a time to go do a project somewhere. So it is a better work environment for them and hopefully more attractive. There is definitely certain trades are really hard to find good workers in. And I think that's something that the NAHB is advocating for the federal government to incentivize getting back into the trades, but making sure that those jobs are good jobs. And I think people are coming around to that. I think I see a lot of, I think this administration has long-term planning for bringing people back to the trades and bringing manufacturing jobs to Americans.
That's wonderful. We could talk to you all day. This is such an interesting topic. We've been visiting with Amelia Dicks, Director of Business Development for Wind River Build in Cleveland, Tennessee, near Chattanooga, correct? And I can just tell in your bio that they shared with me before the episode that you just have a goal of educating the building community, governments, communities on the role of modular housing and right-sized living. And just to close this out, does right-sized living have a definition that you would want to share on maybe even on a philosophical level?
I think that right size living means different things for different people. And we know that we specialize in building small homes. We obviously came from the tiny home industry, and we're never going to say that tiny homes are right for everyone or even that small homes are right for everyone. But it is about building the right thing and building the thing right and changing the narrative around small footprint houses and how high quality they can be. A lot of the impression of building offsite and building small is that it's low quality. That is not what we do. They can be absolutely beautiful. And from our 10 plus years in the business, we know that there's a demand for that. And we know that Americans, their priorities are shifting away from as many square feet as they can have to just wanting something nice that they can be proud to own. And so we're trying to bring back the starter home to react to the deficits that we see and the people that are calling us looking for that and not finding it on the housing market.
Oh, Amelia, it's been such a pleasure to learn from you today. And I know our listeners are going to agree with that. And again, Amelia Dicks, Director of Business Development for Wind River Built. And please come back on and join us again another time on Build America. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you so much.